Hey guys, how's it going? Matt from Foul Ball Productions here. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you're doing well because I'm doing phenomenally. Thank you very much. This is the 86th episode of the MFR podcast, and I'm glad that you are here with me to celebrate such a momentous day. 86. I mean, it's not every day you hit 86. You know, just a week ago it was 85, and a week from now it'll be 87. We'll never have this moment together again. And I glad you're here. Glad you're here today. What's up, Boosh McFadden? Hello, sir. Good to see you. And how you doing? Yeah, it's Tuesday evening. I'm doing pretty well. I had a nice little weekend. I gotta tell you, I know I start every show like this, and I know it's boring, but man, I am just obsessed with golf right now. I can't stop playing. I have just become officially an old white man. I am. I love it. I'm out there like. Try to do it, a few times a week. I went to this thing with a friend of mine. It was kind of cool, actually. It was like a golf simulator. It's like indoor thing where they have like this kind of big screen, right? And then you hit your balls into it, and it kind of simulates, how far you hit. It was pretty cool. Went with a buddy. We had a few cans, as my Irish friend Connor says, cans. He calls them cans, not beers, which is kind of funny. It's like, it's weird. You kind of like don't notice it first. Then you're like, that's just like a thing. You call them cans. Oh, okay. And we were playing for a little bit, and it was a good time, but it was kind of like dumbly expensive. It's like the driving range that I go to in South Austin, it's like $11 for a large bucket of balls, and this place was like, it was $30 every half hour. And and whatever drinks you're buying. But like the place was empty. Like it was Friday night. It was just me and my buddy Connor, and that's it. No one else was in there. And it's like, I don't know about this business model y'all got going here. It doesn't really make any sense. It's like, I think like Top Golf is cheaper, and this was like, they even charged like an incremental fee for every other person that was there. I was like, I don't know. This is feels like kind of a ripoff, but it was pretty cool because it would film your swing. You got to analyze it in this whole thing. So I don't know. I told you, I'm becoming a golf freak. It's so weird. I never liked it. And now I just can't stop playing. I'm playing tomorrow, which is a walking course, which sucks. No cart, but whatever. $1 a mint indeed. Yeah. Sucks. There's too much money. Probably won't go back there. Why are you doing so terrible, Boosh? I'm sorry to hear that, my friend. That's too bad. Well, cheer up. We're going to talk about Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson, so that'll make you smile. If that, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. I made a pretty successful video a few weeks ago about Mr. Fuentes there, because he's a guy that I, didn't really know much about. He was one of these guys that I, as I said in the video, if you've seen it, I'm sorry that I'm repeating myself, but he's just one of these guys that I just kind of believed all the hype about. I didn't ever really investigate him. I just knew the clips, and I was like, this guy's nuts. This guy's an actual like crazy white supremacist. He gives us conservatives a bad name, and I don't really medical crap. I don't care. I do care. That's not true. I care plenty. I'm sorry to hear that, brother. That sucks. That's too bad. Sorry. But look, okay, here's the thing. So Trump getting elected, right? I think I don't know who is left that's like 100% Trump's the best, doing the greatest job. I am still on Team Trump. I think he's doing a mostly good job. I don't agree with everything he's doing. I don't know why we keep spending so much money. I thought the point was to spend less money. You see that fucking dollar amount go up on the national debt, and you're like, good Lord. Like, I don't know much about economics, but I'm pretty sure we can't sustain that. I was a little suspicious about some of the wars, and, I'm not crazy about supporting Israel. Not crazy. I kind of hate it, but overall, I think it's a good thing. But furthermore, I think it's most important, like culturally, than anything. It might, hopefully it'll be good for the country, like as far as policy is concerned in the future of this nation and all that type of good shit. But really what's important is it's cultural, because what Trump getting elected did was allow all these media companies, social media companies, like kind of like everyone, that kind of has got like knives at their neck from like the left and woke people all the time. It gave them the, out to be like, okay, I'm not worrying about this shit anymore. I'm not being gay. I'm not, we're not going to force, we're not going to censor everyone who disagrees with the leftist regime. It's like Hollywood hasn't got the message yet, but like video game companies don't really care. Media outlets don't really care. And it has just changed the tenor of the conversation in the country to such a dramatic degree that we are in a completely different nation than we were a year ago. I mean, a year ago, because if not that Kamala really had a chance, but if Joe Biden won, right, where are we? We're not here. We don't have like, Zuckerberg backing down on the censorship thing. We don't have like, ChatGPT not getting gay. We are probably right back where we were, where we've been. And Trump, like I said, it's more symbolic than anything. It's the fact that we're able, like they gave all these people the excuse to be like, all right, look, that's the majority of the country. We don't have to be so censorious. And also, I don't think this administration is going after these companies in the same way that the Biden administration was. In the sense, like if you saw the Twitter files, there was active by the government. Government was actively trying to censor people and shut down accounts and, literally go after people that went against the regime like that. The pressure is off. And for that alone, the Trump administration is a good thing. I think there's obviously lots of things we can debate and discuss about that. In that, whether or not he's doing a good job, I think it's a good thing. And with that has come a much broader political conversation, namely someone like Nick Fuentes being able to be back on YouTube. He's allowed to be mentioned. I mean, there was a time, if you'll recall, certain names, I mean, you'd get a video either taken right down immediately or demonetized for mentioning their name, like Alex Jones or Nick Fuentes. And that has all been mostly repealed and rolled back to not really being a thing anymore. And that I would point directly to the Trump victory. Not to say that Trump necessarily did it, like it's like his policy or whatever, but like I'm saying, it's the country's like cultural shift has given them the excuse to like, look, we're not going to censor everyone. We're not going to be so gay. We're actually going to allow conversations to happen. And that is such an important thing and such a good thing. And I think whether or not the Trump administration is as successful as they are aiming to be, or they align with our goals, this is a good thing for us. And it's going to be much harder to pull it back the second time. The first time people kind of didn't know. Now, if you tried to bring all that censorship back, I mean, it would get really, really out of hand. Hello, Sammy boy. What's going on? $2 from the Whitfield Report. Thank you very much. Howdy. My channel's back and I'm here. See? That's what I'm talking about. His channel was gone. I mean, Sam would be like one of the only people I would see talking over from Rumble. And now, YouTube got his channel back. And look, that is in no small part, I would say almost entirely due to Trump getting elected. And that's how different things have become. I mean, there's other things I've noticed in the country too, where you see like, remember there was the kid in Florida, black kid with like dreadlocks, and he was like, gearing up to make like a big, social movement because the cops like broke his window in when he wouldn't, get out of the car, and they kind of inadvertently hit him in the face when they were breaking the window, and they wanted to make a big deal about it. And they were about to, and you could see they were getting up to the podium, and then the cops were just like, nah, he was breaking the law. We told him to get out of the car. And then it just died. It just died. A few years ago, that would be a news story for 6 months. There'd be riots and there'd be movements and there'd be politicians. No, that just stopped dead in the crib, which is like great, man. Not say that I'm pro police brutality or anything like that, but I'm sick of grifters. I'm sick of liars. I'm sick of people destabilizing this country in order to like make a few bucks or racially grift. And that's over, man. That is a thing of the past. So I love that. Cotton Ministries, Trump sheep are incapable of holding him to any scrutiny at all. That's going to be true about whoever's in power, dude. There are people who still think that, Russia should go back to Stalinist communism. It doesn't matter. That doesn't mean anything. Yes, there's a lot of people who that's all like it. Like a lot of the people have like a secret agenda too. Like they're going to say that as long as he's doing the most significant thing that they want him to do, which probably a lot of those people are supporters of Israel. And Trump's very supportive of Israel. So it's like, oh, there's nothing. No, he's not doing anything wrong because you don't want to destabilize it because you don't want to split the base because he's doing the thing that you want. And that's always how it's going to be. That's always how it's going to be. There's no way. There's not going to ever be a leader or a personality or a person where there isn't going to be some devotees who, no matter what, are just dedicated without any kind of no flexibility at all. So, but that's just the reality. That's just the reality. What did you say about that? Just like Jimmy Dore says, no matter who you vote for, you get McCain. Yeah, that's the neocon thing. And that's the thing, that Nick Fuentes represents a complete adversary to, because it's like, yeah, he speaks in racially abrasive language, but he completely rejects that entire institution. And that's who's been running our foreign policy since the early 90s, is these neocon guys. And it just, it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And, they've taken hold. Like they're doing the, supporting the Israel and Gaza, supporting the Ukraine war. Now they're trying to look at maybe some regime change in Venezuela. That's just this old guard, like military dominant, unipolar moment jerk offs. And we need to get rid of these pieces of shit. Really need to move on. So if we're America first, which I am, it's like that's what we need to be up against, I think. Hello, Ruben Christopher Haynes. What's going on? You're not getting when you're voted for, just saying. Fair enough. Hey, look, that's your right. That's your perspective. You're allowed to have that. And I think it's healthy. And I think, if you're supportive of a candidate, you should be the most critical. You should be the most vocal when they don't do the things that you want them to do, because you're the one invested. You're the one that voted, and I think that's totally fair. And I also think like presidencies, it's easier to see it in retrospect than when it's going on, because it's every day there's some big news story, and it doesn't always catch like every single story. You get the more sensational ones, or the people that, things people are arguing about or going back and forth over. And that's not always an easy way to categorize or, take inventory of what's actually going on in a presidency. So there's that too. So I don't know. I am still optimistic. And like I said, beyond what he does in office, I think the culture is better. I think it's way more palatable socially to be openly conservative, which is just not something that I've ever been allowed to do, without facing like real repercussions. You see people in the media, you see like voices that just, there isn't this like liberal hegemony over everything that you just have to default to or kind of dance around or qualify, in order to be part of polite society. It's like the culture's shifted dramatically. And I think that's a really good thing. Boosh, I want Trump to be closer to the dictator the communists think he is, arrest his political opponents. If you have a mayor of a major city saying you're not going to enforce the federal laws of ICE, like you're going to like resist that, how is that not like treason or an insurrection or whatever, just violating the law? I don't understand that. It's like, I think he needs to crush people like that. Just needs to stop. So there's repercussions for that, because these fucking queefs, they're not going to go to jail for their beliefs. You think AOC is going to do a stretch for her beliefs like fucking Nelson Mandela? No, that ain't happening. That ain't happening. And that jerk off in the mayor of Chicago, he ain't doing it either. So I just think you need to, be severe, be fair. Like, don't just do it because they disagree with you. Like, don't put Thomas Massey in jail or Rand Paul. But the guys who are like literally, oh, we're not going to enforce the laws that, the American people voted to have enforced. It's like, well, okay, I guess that's the end for you. That's how I feel about that shit. I don't know. Sammy boy. I don't mind Fuentes having a platform. What I do have a problem with is Fuentes not being pushed back by Tucker for some clearly heinous shit that he said. Well, we're going to talk about that podcast. That's pretty much what we're going to talk about all night. It's a long one. There's a lot of things I want to cover on that podcast. It's probably going to be all we talk about because there's a lot there. There's a lot to talk about. I don't know exactly what you're talking about specifically. If you wanted to say something specifically now, maybe I could address it because I might not cover it. Because like I said, there's just so many things. I have so many different time codes that I want to pull up. But if there's something you specifically want to address now, let me know. But I thought it was a pretty reasonable interview. I really didn't see anything that I was just like, the only thing that bugged me, the only thing I didn't like about it was when Fuentes started talking about women and marriage and dating. And I'm like, you don't have any experience with that. Why would I listen to you? You know, you're in your 20s. Aren't you a virgin? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, no offense. I mean, whatever, live your life, king. But like, I don't want to hear your thoughts on it, really. Like, I don't mind when he talks about the culture and what like specifically Gen Z men are facing, because I think that's really insightful and that's interesting. But when he starts talking about like the nature of women, it's like, you don't know the nature of women, Nick. Like, at least not in a relationship dynamic. So it's kind of hard. Like, I'm like, I would rather you didn't. You talk about whatever you want. I don't really care what you got to say about that subject, though. Not all that interesting. Charlie Kirk wasn't a neocon either. No, I know who said he was. I never said he was. Supporting Israel that much is not what I would call America first, but I wouldn't call him a neocon either. The fact that he was praising Stalin. Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, that was weird. But I kind of wanted to hear him say, I wanted to hear him talk more about that. He just said he was a fan or whatever, or admirer, but he's also kind of a troll. So did he really mean that? Or was he just saying it to be like controversial? Or was there something about it? But I don't know what he could possibly say. Like, there's an argument to be made. Now, hear me out here. There's an argument to be made that like Hitler, you know, before he invaded Poland and before the war started, he had more admirable qualities than Stalin, because Hitler actually improved Germany for a period of time. You know, he got rid of the old currency and kind of started fresh and like really helped Germany. I mean, he was literally Times Man of the Year for a while. Like, he wasn't just like some outlier that people hated. Obviously, you know, he turned a corner when he just kept invading Europe and Russia and started massacring people. Then yeah, maybe not the best guy ever. But Stalin never did any of that. Stalin made it worse from the jump. Just an absolute street thug piece of shit, like devil man, you know, like, and in fact, there's a reason why socialism sucks so much, because like all you have to do, like you get this supreme power, and all you got to do is just say the things that, you know, the party says, and wait, and then that's it. You know, you just get to wield supreme power, and he's one of the most evil men in all of history. So I don't know what possible things Nick could be a fan of there. I was curious to hear that, but they kind of brushed over it because I felt like they were in the middle of the story of Nick almost getting shot and killed by a maniac who had killed other people that day. So in the context of that particular story, you had to blow past that because it wasn't relevant to the conversation. I would have liked them to circle back, but I think Tucker would have been a bad interviewer if he interrupted the story about Nick almost getting killed at his front door to talk about like his predilection for Stalin. So I hear what you're saying, but I disagree in the sense that would have been an awful time to have brought that up. Like, it's weird that Nick even did, because it was such a weird, you're like, whoa, what? Can we get back to that in a minute? But anyway. Boosh, I'm so far past caring about commies. We shouldn't be using the National Guard to protect these cities. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that, because it's kind of like the people who live in these cities should not be subject to the worst, rule, like the worst governance that you could possibly have, and that their streets are unsafe and it's a goddamn war zone. Like, they live in the United States of America too. Just because they have corrupt piece of shit, leaders, is like no reason why they should have to be unsafe. And it's like, yeah, I feel like we should start doing this city by city. Just start, you know what I mean? Like policing them, shutting down crime and replacing the leadership so that these things like can't happen anymore. We should not live in a city where there's this much gun crime and this much violence in a country where that's just that commonplace. We just shouldn't. It should be rare. It should be aberrant, like it is in the rest of the world. And it's like, you know, it's not random. It happens in the same neighborhoods all the time. It happens with the same people all the time. I guarantee you the police probably know exactly who's usually doing it, where it's happening, over what specifically. So it's like we're all just playing this pretend game where we go, well, crime's complicated, socioeconomic. No, it's bullshit. You're not enforcing laws. You're not cracking skulls. You're just not policing these cities. And that's the only reason they're allowed to be this violent. And it's like, yeah, why is that something we're comfortable with? Most wealthy nation in the world with the most powerful government known to in the history of mankind. We can't police our own cities. Bullshit. Yes, we can. There's some power game going on. There's some leverage game going on. Or it's just like the result of the failed liberal experiment since the 1960s, which I would argue is 100% accurate. It's like, yeah, this should not be the case. It shouldn't be. And it's like, if you need like a military to stop it, fine. It won't be forever. Just long enough that these pieces of shit get their shit together and you get rid of, you bleed out the corruption. That's what I think. Let him burn. Yeah. That's exactly why I was hoping Tucker pushed him further on that he did. But like I said, it was terrible timing. You just couldn't. Hal 9000. What's up? He's right. We should be using the full force of the regular military. Regular military, I don't know about that. Because then you're going to end up with dead Americans. And the regular military is going to be responsible. I don't know. That could lead to a lot more problems. National Guard, I'm okay with because they're kind of trained in policing. Regular military, I don't know. I hear what people are saying, though, especially when it comes to like deportations and stuff. I don't know. All right, we can get into this right now. I watched another. Dave Smith, big fan of. He was on Louder with Crowder today. That was a fucking horrible interview. It was so boring. Crowder's such a prick. He's just such a argumentative. He talks like a woman. He doesn't he wasn't letting Dave make his points. He kept trying to kind of reframe him. It's like, oh, so you agree with Obama? And it's like, on this particular issue, yeah, but he's not like an Obama voting liberal, you jackass. You know what I mean? It was so disingenuous, but yeah, anyway, so that was happened. That was a big another political podcast that happened today. It's been I'm here for this type of shit. This is I love this type of stuff. These types of conversations, I find them exciting. I find it genuinely progressive. It's like, the mainstream media is such disingenuous shit that they only exist like as a vestige of what used to be. They're not, boomers watch the news, but this is really where the conversations are happening on the internet, on a podcast like this. Commies can't be American. Commies aren't American. You know what I mean? Yeah, fuck communism. One last thing before I get into this. Dave Smith did do a podcast yesterday, basically shitting on Mondami and how stupid his policies are. And the whole thing is just like the episode's titled "Communism is Stupid," and I agree. You should watch that one. That's a good podcast. All right, so I have a few time codes here. Okay, so some of this stuff isn't necessarily relevant. I found it interesting, but I don't know if we necessarily have to talk about it, especially because some of the longer clips I really want to talk about. But some interesting facts that happened in the first few minutes, fuck it. I'll let him say it. You could talk about it, Nicholas. Mr. Fuentes. All right, here we go. All right. Crowder's so gay. Hello, Nadia. Good to see you. Thank you for stopping in. I hope you're having a fantastic day. I'm going to be talking some politics there, Nads. Let's go. Oh, oops. Shared the wrong window. Oh, I'm a silly goose. Sorry. There we go. How many fucking windows do I have open here? Okay. Got it. Okay, cool. Let's go.
The illegals. And once we set the country straight, then we can actually have our constitutional republic back. That was kind of the idea. And that's the mindset that I had going into college.
Amazing. So then what happened?
So I go to college and I'm just at that point a huge Trump supporter. And you got to understand, for me, for my generation, so I was 18. I turned 18 in August 2016. And to us,
That's
Trump,
amazing.
yeah, well, because we're like the first generation that was influenced by Trump coming of age in that moment.
No, I say it's amazing because when you're living in something, you don't appreciate its full significance. But to be 18 in August of 2016, so this really is, as you're forming your views and really yourself.
Yes.
In the middle of this.
Isn't that crazy? Like, I took a moment in my video about Fuentes to talk about this very thing, but it's something that I am very guilty of not really taking into account, especially for the Gen Z. I'm also just kind of learning about this whole Gen Z right movement, as Sencha Ditto, I think, calls the Zoomerwaffen, sort of sarcastically, as they're sort of known a little bit. I was not aware of like this sort of group, but it's like, if you think about it, right, they were born right at the peak of woke, right when all the messaging was that white men, straight white Christian men are evil. They're the responsibility of they're for all the evils in the world. They're the problem in this country. All those statistics about white supremacy is responsible for most crimes. Like, these are when these kids are just coming of age. They're teenagers, right? And it's right under, the first Trump administration, right when that's kicking off. And it's like, yeah, for me, I was like 30 when that happened, like, or 29, like right around that era. I'm already like an adult. So for me, it's like something that's like happened like in my adult life, but these are kids, and what a significant impact that would have on them, and how much that would form you and shape your worldview, I think cannot be understated, because that is so goddamn significant. Like, the demand was respect and be submissive to, be at the mercy of all these identity politic groups, right? And we all, by the way, all share this opinion that you're the villain, you're the bad guy. We all agree on that, no matter who it is, whether it's the LGBT or BLM or Asian Lives Matter or whatever the fuck group it was. It's like, well, at the end of the day, the bad guy, it's you, young white man. You're the problem. And it's like, yeah, wow, weird. They got a very codified racial identity. Who could have seen that coming? That's crazy. It's like, yeah, well, no shit. With Sammy Boy, I'm a younger millennial born in 95. Rush was hugely influential. Yeah, I think you're a unique fella, though, because, I feel like you were politically active early. Like, when I was a kid, when I was like more of a Republican, I was kind of like a standard boilerplate boomer Republican. It was Sean Hannity and Michael Savage. Those were the guys that I thought were fun, especially Michael Savage. I liked him a lot. He was hardcore. I don't know much about Michael Savage, but I mean, Sean Hannity is like, he's just, I don't want to say controlled opposition, but yeah, he's the same. He's not going to ever really cut across the war party or the giant state that we live in. Like, he's just going to give red meat to the base. He's just going to feed them, what they want to hear, but we're never actually going to change anything. The only thing we'll change is we'll go invade Iraq, but we're not going to enrich the average American. We're not going to bring down spending so the costs actually go down across the board. We're just going to tell you what you want to hear and get you fired up. And then we'll just vote for a Republican who will fight another war for Israel. It's like, he's not these aren't real conservatives in the sense that they care about America. Woke and identity politics weren't really terms yet, but political correctness was a term at the time. Yeah, that's why. Yeah, also that's why I always like to hammer Gen X, because they think, they were always so based. They were always so resistant to this. Like, really? Because the 90s is when political correctness was the first time it had ever been seen, and that was your generation. Okay, so maybe stop congratulating yourself all day. Hannity wears a CIA pin. Fuck that guy. He's a Fed stooge. Yeah. So that was just, I just wanted to point that out. And I think it's always important to remember that framing, it's important, like, Sam's young, but like, it's important to remember, like, I'm older, your adult life, the years go faster, but you are slower. You change a little slow, but when you're a kid, right, everything, it's like these milestones, these years are so much more significant. They hit with so much more impact. And these kids, that's when they came up. I started doing YouTube, and a lot of people, you guys found me for me just talking shit about like woke movies and stuff like that, right? And like that was like an era. But if that's what you were born into, if that was your reality, like if that, like when you're young, it's like I knew something before that. If you don't know anything before that, it's like you don't have like a richer kind of like base of the things that you're into, or just having seen the world without that. Like, what else would you come out as? What else would you be? Okay, so I wanted to. So we're gonna fast forward here to, this is basically Nick's like villain origin story, and I thought this was really, really interesting. So let me see, 1340. And I've heard this before, but I still think it's worth going over.
Diversity's a problem and all this. And I decisively win the debate. It's like not even close. The debate wraps up, and this girl who I think I had talked to her on Twitter once or twice comes running up to the stage after the debate, and it's Cassie Dillon. And at this time, she's a fellow at Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro's company. And like I said, I barely knew her. And she comes running up and she says, "Oh my gosh, I live streamed this debate on Periscope on Twitter." She said, and 30,000 people watched it, and you have like 5 job offers. You did incredible. I said, "Wow, I don't know what to say. That's great." She goes,
"You're 18 years old."
Yes. So it's like happening very quickly for me, And she goes, "Do you want to do a post-game interview after the debate?" I said, "Sure." And so she asked.
Yeah, fucking A. Jeremy Piven versus BCU. But what was funny is that, like, in that movie, it was teased how ridiculous they were, how silly all that stuff was. Yeah, what Low Spec's pointing out, the politically correct was the woke for the time. Yeah, tool for division. Yes, in a way, but it's also just, it's the result of the liberal mindset, of the progressivism in general. I mean, it will eventually reach that, because it's a grievance point of view, and there's no, for many people, and especially, when you keep hammering that into young people's heads. I mean, like, if you go to public education like I did, it's like the only way to be a righteous hero was to be like a civil rights activist. We didn't really celebrate the men who stormed Normandy. We did a little bit, but it was like, those were not, the heroes were the people who stood up to racism, or, the gay guys at Stonewall bar or whatever. It's like, that's the stuff that you got as like the most important thing. It's like, well, what's that going to do to the next generation? It's going to turn them into activists, of course. And so it's just going to keep going. And they're going to look at the past generations like, "Oh, you said fag? Oh, well, that's got to go." And it just keeps going, and it just keeps going and going and going until you reach like this whole thing where it's like, gender's not even real. That's a social construct. Like, race is a social construct, except when it gives me advantages, and then or validates my victim status, and therefore give me more political capital. Then it's real. It just becomes so absurd and slices things so far, and then starts to alienate the things. It's like, well, you guys want to hammer about the evil past of this country, but it's also like, well, we're the country that like has the civil rights laws. We're the country that fought a war over slavery. Like, we're the country that liberated Europe from fascism. It's like we don't get the credit for that anymore. And so eventually people are like, "Yeah, wait a minute, fuck you." And then it starts to go pretty hard in the other direction. And it's like, yeah. It started during Obama. It went hardcore during Trump. It did start under Obama. A lot of people tend to not respect that or acknowledge that. They always want to say Trump's the one that created the division. It's like, no fucking way. It was definitely under Obama. And I remember that specifically because when I moved to California, it was so crazy. It was so racial. Everything was so fucking racial. This white privilege, all this stuff. And then, you couldn't have, because I saw it in college, but what I didn't realize was like, that wasn't unique to my college experience. That was happening all over the country. Right. And it was like, and you'd meet these people and they were like, it was like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Like they were cooked. They had these beliefs and there was no nuance and there was no discussion. And if, they found you, they identified you as not one of them, well, that became a problem and it got out of hand. And that was 100% under Obama. No question. It was before then. Obama was just when you noticed. Yeah, but that's when it kicked up. That's when the nitrous tanks hit. And it just became like, okay, it wasn't like happening on the sidelines, or it became mainstream. That's when it really kicked into high gear. Sammy, I'll have to re-upload my interview with Ben Shapiro from when I was 17. Pretty wild considering I disagree with a lot of his takes. That's pretty funny. I'd like to see that. Young Sammy with Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro. I'm having coffee at 6:30 p.m. I'm officially too old for this shit. Yeah. It'd be nice if I didn't have to pay attention to this stuff or care, but I still feel like we're in a very contentious place in this country. And I don't think the war, so to speak, has been won. I think we've got a lot to do, a lot of work to do. And I think, the right wing in this country is basically just kind of like, we're gonna placate the things that are real, right? We're gonna tell you this stuff about like woke college kids and how annoying they are, and it's like as soon as you give us back the power, well, now we're just gonna expand the government for our interests. We're not actually gonna pull back any of the things. It may be some things here and there, but really, we just want the power back, and we're gonna tell you these things that we know you care about and manipulate, your votes so that you just give us the power. Now, Trump is a unique guy because he's not that, but a lot of these other people are. George Bush during Reagan years was politically correct for those paying attention. Yeah, no, they're all the uniparty. They all have like very similar worldview, and guess what? They all agree with the wars every single time. Invading Iraq was a bipartisan issue. Ukraine support was a bipartisan issue. Gaza was a bipartisan issue. It's like every time there's some giant war, yeah, they're all bipartisan. My brother Trump is not different. He is different. He's the only guy that doesn't actually give a shit. That does have his finger on the pulse with what a lot of people like or want. There's no one in my lifetime. There's no one in the history of probably this country who's ever been so defiant to the status quo that would give the middle finger. I mean, everyone, the right loves to support Trump now, but they did not, in 2015, 2016, they did not. He was not their favorite nominee. They didn't want him. They want business as usual. And unfortunately, in a lot of ways, Trump is doing business as usual, but in a lot of ways he isn't too. So I hear what you're saying, but disagree.
Asked me about how I thought the debate went and what my views are and things like that. And, very normal stuff. And then at the end, she says, I just got back from doing study abroad in Israel. She goes, and it was amazing. Would you ever take a trip to Israel? And I said, no, I think I got everything I need right here in America. And she goes, oh, okay. And she wraps up the interview. And that was a little bit of foreshadowing. And this begins a relationship, not a romantic relationship, but we become friends and we start talking. And she's plugged in, like I said, a Daily Wire. She's talking to people at Right Side Broadcasting Network, the college Republicans. I start to develop this friendship with her. And over time, she lands me this show on Right Side Broadcasting Network. And in this time, I'm really starting to lean into America first. I'm becoming more pro-Trump as time goes on. And what really stood out to me was Trump's inaugural address in January 17th. So this was just a couple months later. And in Trump's inaugural, he says famously, a new vision will govern our land. It's going to be only America first, America first. And I said, that's me. Like, that's what I believe. Yeah. I'm an American nationalist.
Me too.
Fully at this point. Not.
So I'll say even this, I mean, even what Nick's pointing out about right now is putting even that into the conversation, allowing national pride and nationalism really to be not dirty words anymore, to not be, to not have like kind of a implicitly negative feeling about your country, whether or not he's demonstrably as based as we'd like him to be. It's like, that is the type of shit that's different. I'm telling you, that's different, because there's a guy like George Bush is going to wave the flag, say the things you want to hear about like abortion and Christian faith. And then he's just going to do whatever the deep state wants. He's not a conservative. You know what I mean? He doesn't actually give a shit. Not to say that Trump's a conservative, but Trump listens to what the people actually want and hears like what's going on, and he sees the pushback. That's why it's like, if I see him as a guy where it's like he's the deal maker, right? He's the balance guy, because it's like he has got so much financial support and there's just so much presumed help coming from the Israeli camp that it's like he knows he can't just tell them to go fuck themselves. He knows he just can't do that. But in ways he has. I think if Israel and the neocons and the traditional Republic establishment had their druthers, we'd be at war with Iran right now. And I think it was Trump who was like, no, we are not doing that. Like, he shot that tweet out in the middle of the night being like, it's done. The 12-day war, it's over. I think that was Trump being like, we're not doing it. And he stood up to Benjamin Netanyahu the other day where he was like, they're not expanding to the West Bank. It isn't happening. You know, it's like, I don't care what you say. It's not happening. It's like, that's not a business as usual Republican at all. That's a guy who's doing what he thinks is right. Whether or not that always works out, whether or not you agree with what he does overall, that's fine. But to say he's a business as usual guy, I think is just bullshit. I just don't think that's right at all.
Even a conservative. And there was one thing that happened just before that really struck me as strange. And I've told this story before. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but suffice to say, Barack Obama in the lame duck period. So the Democrats lost the election. He's on his way out. There's a resolution in the Security Council condemning the settlements in the West Bank in Israel. And typically, the U.S. delegation will veto those resolutions condemning Israel. Well, Obama's on his way out. He's got nothing to lose. So the U.S. delegation abstains from the resolution, and it passes. And Fox News and all the pro-Israel conservatives are calling him an anti-Semite. They're saying he hates Jews. He's an anti-Semite. He hates Israel. And I saw that, and it struck me as strange because it seemed hypocritical. It seemed like how when conservatives would critique anything about race, we got called racist, or anything about feminism, we got called sexist. All Obama did was uphold U.S. policy on the West Bank.
I'd like to just to highlight that point, as that is, see, the thing is, like, I was not keen to this Israel thing at all, even up to maybe a year ago. You know, like I was not keen to it at all. I knew it was like a contentious thing. And we always kind of joked about like how Israel runs the country, and but I didn't really understand to the extent it was. And I don't think a lot of the country did, to be completely honest. But one thing I definitely did notice was the second there was any pushback to support of Israel, that did start to happen. You did see people on the right and these sort of conservative influencers. That was immediately what they launched at people. Oh, you're anti-Semitic. And you're like, that's exactly what the left does every time you disagree with them. Oh, you're racist, you're homophobic, you're sexist, whatever it is. And it's like, so now you're doing that same thing, that exact same thing that I thought we all just came through 8 years of that and more, 10 years of that, and just being like, bullshit, we don't play those games. Marketplace of ideas, the best idea wins, debate, free speech, right? So, well, all of a sudden, not when it comes to this issue. Suddenly there's a huge impediment to that. What the fuck is that about? Why is that like right there in our face? And it's like, and then that's when I first heard James Lindsay, who I still respected at the time, started talking about this woke right thing, woke right. And he didn't define it because he's a fucking idiot. But he didn't define it. And I thought he meant the people who were immediately going after the pro-Israel or the anti-Israel people, calling them anti-Semitic. I was like, oh yeah, that is pretty woke. That is kind of like the woke right. It's like, no, he meant the other way. He meant the people who are more nationalistic, who didn't give a shit about supporting Israel and were pushing back on their war. That's who was the woke right. And I was like, what the fuck is going on with this whole, we had just a few great months of being optimistic and united and positive. And all of a sudden this thing comes up and it's just like, what is all this shit? What is all this shit? APAC whores run this country. I don't even know what the counter argument to that would be. I swear to God, if you look, there's that image of all the members of Congress and how many of them are controlled by or not controlled, but have taken money from APAC. It is the vast majority, and it is almost all the Republicans. And to the Democrats' credit, it's less Democrats, but it's still the vast majority of Democrats too. It's like, what's your counterpoint to that? What they don't act on their constituents' influence? It's like weird, because every time something that Israel wants to do comes up, we do it. Odd. That just seems to be a real unique coincidence. That's a crazy overlap. Boosh. Matt, I have something for you to read. It's extremely relevant. DM, unless we aren't friends, just means you're a gay boy. I'm not a gay boy. That is fucking Zach's taking something out of context. Yeah, sure. Are we? Yeah. Hit me up on X. On X, the cool platform X. Nick Fuentes is woke as fuck, though, Matt. No, I don't think he's woke. I don't know. That's crazy. What he has done is he has not rejected identity politics when it comes to white people. Now that comes up in this interview. That's not woke. It's something else. But to Nick's point, it's like, I don't know if you think that's going away. If you think like, hey, we'll just be the tolerant, polite, Christian Americans that we've always been. And all those groups are just not going to have a group consciousness while, they'll just we'll all grow to be this amazing melting pot of Americans. Like, you're fucking crazy. Like that, they're not going to do that. They're not going to abandon those identities. That's that identity, like consciousness. I'm not saying that means we have to then, oppress anyone, but for us to like sit here and not acknowledge that that's happening to every other group except us and our tolerance, what does that get us? Nothing but hate. So it's like, well, we should cut the shit. Not to say that, like I said, it doesn't mean we need to be hateful. It just means we have to be aware of that. We have to take it seriously. It's a real thing. Everyone else treats it real. We're just going to pretend that's not happening. La-di-da. Listen, the 90s are over. It's just not the world we live in anymore. What's up, Zax? How you doing, brother? Well, a lot of people, Boosh, a lot of people have been making the argument that we were never really post-racial. We were just deluding ourselves, which is interesting. I don't know if that's true, but I think there's a big conversation to be had there. I thought we could get there. I think we can get back to that place in a sense where it's just not the most important priority. But man, there are so many political interests in this country. There are just so many, special interest groups that like that. That's just hammered all the time. I mean, you see like, even it's like even like a good property that comes out, like even like I watched that show SAS Rogue Heroes that Zach's recommended, really good. But even in that, they had this like, it's like basically about how white Europeans saved white Europe, you know what I mean? And even in that, they had to thrust in like an Algerian spy woman who didn't exist. It's like, if you think like if you think, oh, we could just go back to being post-racial without everyone else becoming post-racial, that's just suicide. That's impossible. There's just no way to do that unless you want to lose. Unless you're sure you want to lose, I don't see that being possible. I really don't. He denies the Holocaust repeatedly. He does not deny the Holocaust. I've heard him talk about it maybe critically, but I think like the thing that he said in the Dave Smith thing was that he's like, I don't care. And it's like, it shouldn't dictate our policy. And I think that's fair. And peddles anti-Semitism, it's like, that's a complex conversation, and we're absolutely going to get there. Every group votes pro-group except one. Yeah. And also every group is encouraged to have a very rich racial identity except for one. And that's not just true here. That's true in Europe, too. I mean, look at Europe. Like, Europe's going away. We're going to lose thousands of years of culture and racial identity in the span of a few decades. It's just going to go away. If you think we are post-racial, that's fucking retarded. Yep, that's a true fact too. Yep, that's real. That's real. Post-racial cultures won't work. If it's just us. Yeah, because it's like they're not like, that's what we thought. We thought that's what we were doing. We thought we were like, we're gonna get past this. We're just gonna judge individuals. We're gonna, and then all of a sudden the fucking knife comes right in the back. And the second we look the other way, and then we become the biggest villains in our own country. You can't. I would love to believe that, but it's just not real. Boosh, I had friends of every race and religion in grade school. No one cared. Even if I started college, no one cared. It wasn't until Obama that I heard the term racist over and over and over. Yeah, but you have to understand it wasn't like, yes, that's when it bloomed. But that activist scholarship that had been going on in colleges had been brewing since the 60s and maybe a little bit before, but had really started to hit in like the 80s. That's when like most of the terms we would hear that came out, in the whole woke movement. That's where those the seeds of those trees began to grow. And it's like, it's entrenched now. You can't just, we're not going to be able to just put the genie back in the bottle. We just can't. Peddles anti-Semitism and anti-white trope. I hear what you're saying. Well, we're gonna talk about that. All right, the chat's fired up. Chat's real fired up. Let's play a little bit more, because I find this whole thing very, very interesting. This origin story I find fascinating.
That we've had since '67, which is we don't support the settlements. I said, how is it anti-Semitic to just be consistent on our U.S. foreign policy? Like I said, which is a Republican-Democrat consensus. And I got attacked for this. I wrote a big article about this. I tweeted about it. I tweeted at Ben Shapiro. I said, I've never seen anything on the Daily Wire that's actually critical of Israel. And he quote tweets me. And at this time, I have 1,000 followers on Twitter.
How old are you?
I'm 18. I'm a freshman.
Still a freshman in college, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this is even before I started my show. And I don't know, I probably got 100 likes on this tweet. It wasn't a viral tweet. He quote tweets me and says, to accuse a Jew of dual loyalty is the surest sign of anti-Semitism. And like, this is how it sort of begins. And I see this tweet. And by the way,
isn't this interesting? I find this fascinating. Boosh, fuck yeah, buddy. Thanks for joining. You the fucking man. And how'd you find a base chat randomly? Well, we're happy to have you, buddy. Thank you for the compliment. This is, it's been an evolution, It all started with fucking Star Wars. If they just left Star Wars alone, they could be doing whatever they want. They could be a Democrat in office and they could fucking kill all the Palestinians. I wouldn't even notice. But once they fucked with Star Wars, once they fucked with the things that I love, well, it took me down this rabbit hole. And here we are praising Nick Fuentes. You made your fucking bed. Lie in it. But isn't it interesting that this happened to Nick when he was 18 years old, just barely like a little Cabbage Patch Kid in the conservative movement, just a young man, right? Just starts asking questions about Israel. Just kind of like, wait, why is this, why are we criticizing? This is what had been our foreign policy for 50 years. Why, Obama's just doing that. Why does that make him an anti-Semite? And I thought we didn't like when we called people names because we disagree with them. Boom! They jump right on him. And you're like, oh, well, when you see it from that perspective, when you see he's an 18-year-old just literally asking innocent questions about like this whole thing with Israel, and he's immediately attacked, I could see growing up with a lot more animosity towards Israel and the Jews, because it's like, well, they wanted to, kill him from the jump. And it gets so much worse. I mean, his life becomes so much more unlivable for so long. It's only now where it's like he's allowed to like see the sun. And that just started like this year, a few months ago. I thought, I didn't know anything about this guy. I didn't know anything about any of this stuff that was going on behind the scenes. I had no idea. And so it's like, yeah, maybe he's got some frustrations. He was 18. You think you'd all respond with like magnanimous, well, okay, I guess I'll just listen and like grow and I'll develop my own. No, I don't think you fucking would. I think you'd have a pretty sharp axe to grind. I know I would. I don't think I would have been all cool and understanding. I think I'd be pretty fucking pissed. I think so. Ben takes the exact opposite approach of Fuentes. What do you mean? Exact opposite in what way? He just tried to crush an 18-year-old kid who asked questions as to why, he accused him of like this vicious anti-Semitism, when he's a young man. And Ben Shapiro was pretty young too.
That was on Christmas Eve in 2016.
He immediately called you an anti-Semite.
Mm-hmm. So I'm driving to Christmas Eve Mass with my family. And I see on Twitter, the notification comes up, Ben Shapiro quote tweets me, calling me an anti-Semite. And I was like, what is this? Like, why is this guy attacking me? because I don't have a platform at this time. I'm not an influential guy or anything. And so then I put out another tweet similar. I said something like, if you're China first, you should live in China. If you're Mexico first, you should live in Mexico. If you're Israel first, maybe you should go live in Israel.
But Sam, the thing about Shapiro is I don't think he gives a shit about this country. I think he's doing the old playbook, which is that, he'll, like I said, he will say the things that we know are true, that we want to hear, and then he'll just hijack it all for, I think this whole country could fall into a pit if it made Israel just a little bit stronger. I honestly think that that's where Ben Shapiro's loyalties lie. I don't know if it's that extreme, but I think his number one priority is the success of Israel. I don't think he gives a shit about this country. And if he does, it's in a far less significant capacity than it is for Israel. And you're like, okay, that makes you an agent of a foreign nation. Like, if just replace Israel with any other country, and you'd see how fucking absurd that is. Like, even if it was France, if we just had like a prominent media figure and their entire agenda was to make France stronger, you'd be like, that guy's a fucking traitor. Who is this fucking guy? You wouldn't accept that. If it was China, we'd all, there'd be a war. But for some reason, when it comes to Israel, the Holocaust, it's like we're allowed to siphon resources and our own men and go fight wars on their behalf. All our politicians are paid for by them. For some reason, this particular one, it's like it was like a weird blind spot. Oh, well, that's anti-Semitism. Who fucking gives a shit? Aren't we past that? Didn't we realize that was just coming from bad actors anyway? Every single time you called someone racist or sexist, it wasn't because you believed that. It's because you're trying to discredit them because they probably had some points you didn't want to argue with. How is this one any fucking different?
Israel. And again, he quote tweets me and says, you're an anti-Semite.
That same night?
This was, I think, a couple weeks.
I think it's because of Israel. Sam, I think it's because Charlie was a staunch supporter of Israel. Rest in peace, but up until his death, up until right before his death, I mean, if you asked fucking Josh Hammer and Netanyahu, apparently he was, till he died, he was the most supportive person of Israel. Weird you say that, Josh, because you were in a group chat where he said he couldn't support the country anymore. Odd that you would say after his death that he was staunchly supportive of Israel. That's suspicious. Don't you see? That's suspicious. And this is still a foreign nation. I don't give a fuck. Why do we support them like that? There's no other country we do that to. There's no other country comes even close. That's weird, man. That's not in my interest. And even if we did, I would object to that too. That's how we treated England. I'd have a problem with that. I don't care who it is. Not my fucking country. Not my problem.
Later. Happened a little bit further down the line. And so...
Were you surprised that he knew you were?
Yeah, I was. I was surprised at why he cared.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, how does he even know who I am or what I'm about? And it turned out that Cassie Dillon, she had texted him earlier and she wanted him to take me under his wing. She texted him after that debate and said,
but Sam, what is radicals Islam? What is their problem with our country? It's that we support Israel. It's that we support the endless oppression of the Palestinians and that we have military bases in their Holy Land. Well, that's why they have a problem with us. That's the problem. They don't hate us for our freedom. They hate us because there's a constant torture of an entire captive population that are Arabs, that are Muslims, by this other tiny nation that we prop up that couldn't do that without us. That's why they fucking hate us. That's why they did 9/11. That's why they did the towers twice. If that wasn't the case, they wouldn't give a shit because we wouldn't be involved in their lives. We wouldn't be bombing their fucking countries and killing their children. And I'll tell you what, if you fucking killed my family or my friends, I'd get pretty fucking radical too. And that's just been going on. Since what? Since we overthrew the Iranian government in the 50s? They have a reason to be pissed, dude.
you know, you really like this guy. He's amazing. He did this great debate. She goes, but he's a little too pro-Trump. He's a little too Trumpy. And he goes, I'll take a look. And so I guess the two of them were kind of like grooming me in a sense.
They might hate us, but they were not going to go out of their way to bomb us, dude. That was one of bin Laden's. He laid out why he did it. He said why. What do we give a fuck? Why would the average American person be like, no, it's 100% in our interest to continue massacring Palestinians and having military bases in Saudi Arabia? No, that's 100% in our interest. Is it? Prove that. How? Make that argument if Israel's not in the equation. I'd love to hear how that's in our interest as Americans. I don't see it.
They wanted me to go maybe and be a Daily Wire.
They despise the West, Matt. France is France supporting Israel like the USA? Well, yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you noticed that. That's when I was like, my fucking like alarms went off, was when Trump wanted to bomb Iran. All of a sudden, Keir Starmer, Macron, all these people who the leader of Germany, all these people who hate every single thing Trump does on this one issue. Oh, all of a sudden they all agree. All of a sudden it's the best possible scenario. And with Islam wrecking their country, I agree. I'm not saying it's a good culture. I'm not saying I'd want to live there, but it's a difference between them having their culture over there and then and it coming into another culture. You know, and ask Israel if they're so fucking pro-diversity. Ask the government of Israel if they love all this. If immigration's their strength and diversity is their strength. I don't fucking think they'd agree. Somehow the West, though, we can't have a national identity. We can't have a white identity, and we have to just the entire third world needs to come to our countries. What the fuck, man? Why? Yeah, I know, because it's been imported. Because those countries have been imported, because those cultures have been imported. I'm not saying it's a good culture. I'm not saying I want it, but I'm just saying we don't need to bomb them either.
Or maybe looking me as a potential conservative activist or influencer. And so they started paying attention to me. And the more critical of Israel I was, I started to get this really intense pushback from the both of them and from a lot of the people at Daily Wire.
Why do you think?
Hey, look, Bush, you'll hear no argument for me. I don't think they should. I don't think they should be, being immigrated into these countries in mass numbers. I don't think that. I don't understand how that's in the interest of those countries at all. Just like I would say the same thing here. But there's some weird guilt you're supposed to feel for these other cultures. You're supposed to have empathy for. You're supposed to. They're poor. And look, to be fair, like we keep overthrowing governments in those regions. We keep destroying the established governments like Syria, with Assad. And it's like, well, yeah, these are actual refugees. It doesn't mean, but it's like, if we stop fucking around over there, we won't have these problems, man. But why do we keep fucking around over there? That's the question you need to understand the answer to. And it ain't because we're so fucking magnanimous and we just want to bring democracy. That ain't it.
So you're an 18-year-old college freshman, you're clearly talented and you're engaged, you're really interested, and you ask not crazy questions like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
And rather than...
Wait, I didn't say that. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying the Jews are forcing immigration. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the rule doesn't apply both ways. It's like, well, yeah, why don't you take some of these refugees, You guys are, like, why is it only got to be European countries? Why don't you guys take some too? You're doing well. You're getting $3 billion a year from us. And they're like, oh, no, absolutely not. It's like, okay. And one of the reasons they don't want, they don't want to give the Palestinians voting power is because it's like, well, then they won't have control over the voting populace the way they do. It's like, okay. Yeah, that's what we're saying.
Explain it. They just call you a racist, call you an anti-Semite. Like, that's the first response. That seems like the least effective. Well, it turned out to be not very effective in your case, but that seems like the least effective.
All right. Time is moving here. Let me fast forward just a little bit to a point that Nick makes. And because I had a similar realization and I wanted to point this out. It is about It is about the Israel thing. He made it obviously years before I did, but I can't read your DM right now. I'm in the middle of a show. You think Fuentes is a bad actor and he's definitely not a conservative? I think he's speaking what he believes to be true. That's my impression. Whether or not, I don't, the quality of the ideas can be discussed and debated. There's plenty of things that he says that I think like it isn't as constructive as he thinks it is. And I think it makes it very easy to dismiss, but he's not 100% wrong. And this whole Israel thing is a huge problem. And I'll tell you what, it's the only issue in this country that the left and the right see the same way. You got like the boomer neocons, the evangelists who are, pro-Israel. And then you probably got, like pro-Israel Jews on the left. But, the left on the whole doesn't support Israel. And like the right, the based right, the America First right, they don't either. It's like the only thing we agree on. Okay, so this I wanted to just get to this one real quick. Just because I had a similar reaction here. So hold on. There we go.
And the more that I read, the more.
So this is when Nick was working with the Daily Wire and started asking more and more questions about why do we support Israel? Why do we give all this money to Israel? Like, why do we, what is that? Why do we do that? Why does America do that? And he couldn't get any real answers out of it.
More that I dug into the subject, the more I found out there's a lot of these neocon Jewish types behind the Iraq war. There's the foreign aid complex, which is really unique. There's AIPAC, which is this intense foreign lobby where it's bipartisan. It seems to be the only thing that the parties can agree on. And so it just made me burn more with curiosity. So I just kept asking them. And eventually they said, you know what? We're not going to talk to you anymore. And these are my friends. I met them, went to Christmas parties with them. And all of them one day said, you're done. We're blocking you. We're never going to speak to you again. We're never going to have you on our show. And I said, wow, like this seems like inhuman. I'm struck by how impersonal this is. Like here, I thought we're friends. We're all conservatives. Maybe we disagree on one issue. Now I'm being canceled by the right. So I was shocked by this.
When was this?
This was February or March 2017.
So you're still a freshman in college?
Yes.
Are you even paying attention to college at this point?
No, not at all. And my grades started to suffer because I was just really focused on this.
So why I wanted to highlight this clip was because, I really wasn't woke to any of this. I wasn't aware of almost any of this stuff, it just because the PR had been run so well for so long. And, you really had to do some reading, you'd have to read like the Israel lobby or something like that to get to the truth, because the PR, the media campaign had been run so well that, yeah, you would just believe that the reason all these Arabic countries hate Israel is because they just hate Jews. It's completely irrational. There's no foundation for it. And we're just like, oh, that's so illiberal. Obviously, we support them. But there's so much more to the story. So this was only, 6-7 months ago, maybe? Like when Douglas Murray and Dave Smith were on Rogan, because I've been listening to Dave Smith kind of criticize Israel and the war for a while. And I was like, man, I'd really like to hear the other side of the argument. I'd like to just hear it just so I for my own edification. So I know, like, I'm not just jumping on a side on this thing. And I listened and I was like, oh, you don't have an argument. You literally don't have an argument. It's just because you want to. There's not like a good justification here. There's not like a foundation of like, well, no, you don't understand. It's like, no, you don't have you don't have an explanation why you get to just massacre Palestinians. Like, you can say October 7th till you're blue in the face, but that doesn't give you the right to just wipe out a people. And if you guys don't, if there's people out there who don't think that that's what they were doing, it's like, go look at those pictures. You think that was just about hostages and getting rid of Hamas? Like, okay, I got a bridge to sell you. And it's like, oh, like, and that's what's weird. You ask that question and you keep asking that question. You start like scrutinizing Zionism. All of a sudden there really is no actual answer other than they feel entitled to it because they say God says that they can have it. And the people who live there, fuck them. That's not an acceptable like stance. or worldview. And if it is, if it's like, okay, well, I don't want to pay for that. I don't think we should have to pay for that or support it militarily at all. That's my stance. That's how I feel about it. What happened? Oh, shit. Oh, is it back? Huh. I don't think it's because of what I was saying. Yeah, I don't think it's because of what I was saying. I think it's because I'm playing too much of Tucker's interview. I don't think it's because of what I'm saying. That's pretty funny, though. Maybe, yeah, I think it's just playing too much of and it's got millions of views. I think that's, yeah. I don't think that was a targeted strike by the Jews, but that's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. Actually, you know what? I do think they're our greatest ally. I do. You know, now that I think about it, oh, was that $7,000 just showed up my account? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Okie dokie. That was, huh. Well, now I don't know what to do because the point was it was Tucker. Tucker took me down. I think that's just YouTube's algorithms. No one's making that choice. No one who runs Tucker's channel is looking at a live stream with 7 people watching and being like, God, it's got to go down. If you're a YouTuber and you've looked at your YouTube studio and people who've used your clips or copyright things, it's like buried. You don't even know, like you have to go look for it. So it's like, I don't think that's what happened. I think it's just, they just have it built in software algorithm detection that finds that. So, let me see here. All right. Well, I guess I'll just talk about it then. There's nothing really else. Like I can't show it. It appears, and we've almost reached an hour and a half anyway. So, look, here's my thoughts. I think this guy, whatever you think of him, if you haven't actually listened to things that he says, I think he deserves you to listen to him. That doesn't mean you have to agree or see what, see eye to eye on his policies or see the world the way Nick Fuentes does. And by all means, their fans are not, his fans are not necessarily going to be all that receptive to you being like, what's going on here? Because I made a 40-minute video being like, I was wrong about this guy. He's actually pretty cool. My comments were like, you fucking suck, boomer. Fucking, I was called a Jew. I was called a Fed. I was just like, all right. But in my observations, he's not the guy that I was informed on. Now, he does have some controversial opinions about the Jews that I do disagree with, actually, because to me, some of the most outspoken anti-Zionist, like anti-Israel's influence in our government are Jews. Right. I mean, like Dave Smith and Robbie Bernstein do a show, called Part of the Problem that I watch pretty much every episode of. And they're both Jews and they're both very outspoken about Israel's influence, and by Nick's own admission, like one of his best friends is a Jew. And, Norman Finkelstein, right, who writes some of the most critical books on Israel. So I think when you talk in those terms, it's easy to discard you. It's easy to they're divisive. And also I do think people can take them wrong, draw bad conclusions that are not helpful, that actually don't move the ball forward in a way that, it actually does need to be moved. So I think like, I don't agree with everything, but I do think the guy, is far more reasonable than his critics give him credit for. And I really think most of the reason why he's just become so blacklisted and so toxic is because he's so critical of Israel. And, for me, it's like, it's not even necessarily like a racial issue. It's like, it's a foreign country. Fuck you. It's not the United States of America. And to learn that they have this much influence over our government and our foreign policy and the wars we fight, and it's like in service of them, I on such a severe principle disagree with that as an American and just as a human being. It's like, I don't really care about what happens to your country. It's like, it's not my country. I care about what happens to me, my family, my friends, my nation. That's what I care about. And it's like, you're not going to convince me I should otherwise. It's like, oh, I can be more empathetic. It's like, I just, every time we've done that, it's just kicked us right in the ass. So I don't really care. Do a Tucker impersonation. I don't really think I have a good one. I like his high pitched laugh. He's got like a weird laugh sometimes. And he does that weird thing where he's just like, yeah, I'm a Christian. They're friends with me. I mean, he's one of the worst people that I know, but yeah, we're friends. It's like he does that kind of weird little, he takes a shot at people, which is super funny. But I would recommend checking out this whole interview. I think it was great. And I think you're going to get a very different impression of who you think this guy is from this interview, from the Dave Smith interview. I think he's not the guy we've been told he is. He definitely has some controversial opinions. I agree with that, but I think he speaks from the heart, and I think what he believes, what he says he believes is best for the country. Sam disagrees, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe they'll demonetize. Let me see if they did demonetize the stream. I don't know. That hasn't happened to me in a really long time, but it's usually just something long form and has nothing to do with. I just thought because it was another YouTube video, it wouldn't be a problem. Let me see. If I go to live, monetization's still on, so it might have just been like a temporary thing. I don't know, but okay. Well, I planned on talking about that longer, but obviously I just can't do anything about it. I just can't do what I plan to do, unfortunately. Let me see here. Okay. Okay. But yeah, I'd say hear him out. That's my advice because I was wrong. And I learned a lot from listening to him. Look, I think there are better critics of Israel. If you want to, you want to learn more about why Israel sucks, I would say listen to Part of the Problem. Listen to Dave Smith's show because he's more cute, sharp, well-read, or Scott Horton, even better. Those guys will give you, a lot of information that you don't get from any mainstream media source or any kind of education that I was given. So I think it's super valuable. Boosh, I'm not pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, but I dislike Palestine a lot more. I think if you knew the history of Palestine a little more, like at least since Israel showed up, I think you'd be more empathetic than you realize. If you realize that these people have just been getting killed since the early 1900s by people who that isn't their country. And I think you'd learn, and we've been paying for a lot of it and supporting it. Yeah. You're late to the party on Nick Mack. He's starting to lose me, to be honest. I don't know. Look, I can only keep up with what happens. I'm slow. I'm stupid. I'm sorry. I'm not perfect, but that's just such a not real point. It's like the Romans named it Palestine. There were people living there. It's like, yes, it was under the Ottoman Empire, but Germany was under the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Was that not a country? Were that not people there? Like simply because it wasn't defined by the borders of Germany, it didn't exist. It's like that's horseshit. That's a bullshit talking point. And it's just as much bullshit for Palestine too. So yes, it was under the Ottoman Empire. It didn't mean it didn't exist. Didn't mean there weren't people living there. It's like, yeah, it didn't have defined borders the UN recognized. Like, okay. But there's still people there. The Russian Jews who moved in sure as fuck weren't the locals. And let me tell you, they did not treat the locals very good. the understatement of the fucking century. So, look, I really don't want to get into all these details. It's been a massacre ever since. So, look, with that, I guess we'll have to wrap it up because I didn't have anything else planned. So, you guys have a fantastic fucking week, and I will see you guys. Next Tuesday. I'm gonna send you over to Nadia. Make sure you harass her. Now, listen, I'm sending you over to Nadia, okay? But please be mean to her and make fun of her. Don't let me send you there from my channel. Give her a rate, and you're not mean, okay? Bust her balls the entire time. All right, I'll see you guys. Have a good one.